After blowing what was once a 14-game lead, the Red Sox met the Yankees on October 2, 1978 to decide the winner of the American League East, and in a game that single-handedly represented the curse of the Bambino, a contact-hitting shortstop who received the nickname of Bucky Dent. So let's see how things got to that point, and how he received that nickname.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
The mid to late 70s was one of the best periods of the historic Yankees-Red Sox rivalry. The Yankees were competitive after their longest playoff drought since they were called the New York Highlanders, and while the Red Sox were still in the midst of their World Series drought that lasted since Babe Ruth was on the team back in 1918, it looked like one of these teams was going to put them back on top. They finished second or third every year from 1970 to 74, and 75 looked to be that year. They swept the A's in the ALCS after they just won 3 straight World Series, and they would go up against the Reds in the World Series, and in one of the best World Series of all time, they would famously win and you would just assume they won Game 7 the next night. But they didn't, and they weren't able to get back there the next 2 years, as the ones taking their place was the Yankees. The Yankees would win the AL East for the first time in 1976, and Chris Chambliss would hit a walk-off home run in Game 5 of the ALCS for their first pennant in 12 years. They would end up being swept by the team the Red Sox lost to in the Reds, but they came back the next year. Despite the Red Sox winning 97 games, it wasn't enough to top the Yankees for their second straight division win. And for the second straight year, they played the Royals in the ALCS. And again, they won, topping them in 4 games this time, to set up the most frequent World Series matchup of all time, and the Yankees and Dodgers' 10th matchup. And after Reggie Jackson had his historic 3-home-run game in Game 6, the Yankees led by Billy Martin were back on top. So going into 1978, the Yankees were carrying their momentum from their title, while the Red Sox were still expected to contend. And in the offseason, Mike Torres would switch sides, signing with the Red Sox, while they also traded for Dennis Eckersley and Fred Kendall, while the Yankees added Goose Gossage and Raleigh Eastwick. So both teams were bolstering their pitching for what was sure to be a tight race. And it wasn't just these two competing for the division crown. Orioles also won 97 games in 1977, and the Tigers with rookies Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker had potential. So it truly was anyone's division, but no one could expect the twists and turns and dents these teams would go through. But in the first half of the season, it appeared this wasn't going to be a race at all. On July 8th, the Red Sox swept a doubleheader from Cleveland, with Dennis Eckersley beating his former team in Game 1, and that put them up by 10 games in the American League East, tying their largest lead of the season they had just a few days prior. And it wasn't the Yankees who were down 10, it was the Milwaukee Brewers. The surprise team of the year, they were 12 games over 500 at that point, after winning just 67 games the year prior. And behind the Brewers was the Yankees, whose first half had been a disaster considering their expectations. Billy Martin was a smart, successful manager who often got himself in trouble, and despite 1977 being a World Series winning year, it was full of problems. Clubhouse drama eventually led to the famous incident where Billy Martin pulled Reggie Jackson out of right field, which led to a fight between the two in the dugout on national television, that game also being against the Red Sox, and the tensions continued in the next year. Martin gave the Reggie Jackson treatment to Mickey Rivers, and an alcohol-fueled fight between team members on an airplane led to the Yankees flying on charter flights instead of commercial. The Yankees fell out of contention quick, and Billy Martin was on his very familiar hot seat, while dealing with injuries to Willie Randolph and Catfish Hunter. Despite the tension, Billy Martin managed the All-Star team on July 11th, with 5 Yankees and 5 Red Sox representing the American League, who would lose 7-3, and things only got worse for the Yankees over the next few weeks. The Brewers remained in second, while the Yankees continued to fall further behind, going down 13 games before the game against the Royals. And in that game, they went to extras, and in the bottom of the 10th, with a runner on, Martin gave Reggie Jackson the bunt sign, and after fouling the first pitch, he took it off. But Jackson continued to try and bunt the next 2 pitches, and he would end up popping out. And after losing that game, the Yankees were down to 14 games. And as Jackson was suspended by the team, Billy Martin heard the rumors that George Steinbrenner was trying to trade him to the White Sox, meaning they planned to fire Bob Lemon, who would become the Yankees manager, while Martin would become the manager for the White Sox. And Martin was not happy. He said on Jackson and Steinbrenner, "The two of them deserve each other. One's a born liar, the other's convicted." And that quote would really be his final words before exit, as the next day on July 24th, he announced that he was stepping away because of health reasons, doing so on the advice of a legal advisor, as it was almost certain that the Yankees were going to fire him. Bob Lemon would become the next Yankee manager, and fans were not happy about Martin's exit, with some even going so far to burn their season tickets outside of Yankee Stadium. But Martin's exit would be when things completely changed. In the immediate aftermath, it was more of a case of the Red Sox not playing well, as they lost 10 of their last 13 games in July, while the Yankees won 11 of their last 15, cutting the deficit down to 6.5 games after it was at 14 games not even 2 weeks prior. And still, they were behind the Brewers, who were now just 5 games back. but they would fall out of contention halfway through August, losing 8 of 11 straight games against the Yankees and Red Sox, both who had similar months, with the Red Sox going 19-10, while the Yankees went 19-8, with the Red Sox holding a 7-game lead going into September. And that lead would go down to 4 after they lost 4 out of 6 to Oakland and Baltimore. And that set up for a massive 4-game series at Fenway against the Yankees. Though there were still plenty of games left to play after, it seemed that the Yankees almost had to take at least 3 out of 4. And well, they would do that and much more. They would start immediately, beating up on their old teammate in Mike Torres in Game 1, who lasted just 1 inning, winning 15-3 in the end. And that was a sign of things to come, though not everyone saw it that way. Bob Lemon would say after Game 1, "You've got to enjoy it while you can. We'll probably have to scratch for runs in the next game." And he would gladly be wrong. The Yankees were up 8-0 in the second in Game 2, as rookie Jim Beattie shut out the Red Sox for 8 innings, as the Yankees won 13-2. And the mood of the team changed. Bob Lemon said after that game, "The way we're playing, I won't be happy with the split in the next 2 games. I want them both." And it looked good beforehand, as Ron Guidry with his 1.84 ERA to that point was on the mound in Game 3, going up against Dennis Eckersley. And after Guidry gave up 2 hits in his first 3 batters he faced, he wouldn't give up another hit, as the Yankees pounced on Eckersley, winning 7-0. And though the Yankees still had the division lead, it seemed as if the Red Sox were chasing them, and they were internally imploding. Carlton Fisk in frustration said after that game, "How can a team get 30-something games over 500 in July, and then in September see its pitching, hitting, and fielding all fall apart at the same time?" Scientists still haven't found an answer, but it was happening, and the Yankees could tie the division with another win. And in desperation, the Red Sox put Bobby Sproul on the mound, making just his 2nd career start. And he wouldn't make it out of the first inning. The Yankees were up 6-0 after the 4th, and that was enough, as the Yankees won 7-4 in what was the closest game of the series. And after being down 14 games not even 2 months ago, the Yankees were now tied with the Red Sox. They went into Fenway down 4 games, and proceeded to win all 4, outscoring the Red Sox 42-9, out-hitting them 67-21, scoring 10.5 runs per game with 17 hits per game. And for this reason, this 4-game series is known as the Boston Massacre, a reference to the actual Boston Massacre in 1770, when 5 American colonists were shot and killed, while hundreds more were hurt when British soldiers began firing into a crowd who was shouting at them and throwing projectiles. For Red Sox fans, they couldn't decide which event was worse. But the thing was, even after the massacre, there were still 20 games left to play, but the next 7 weren't much better for the Red Sox, splitting with the Orioles, losing 2 to Cleveland, and going to the Bronx, where they would lose 2 out of 3, putting them 2.5 games behind. They did win the last game of that series, and the pitching, hitting, and fielding that Fisk was talking about earlier made a comeback. They had the fortune of playing the young Tigers, who made improvement that year, and the last-place Blue Jays for their final 13 games. They won 3 out of 4 in Detroit, then 2 out of 3 in Toronto, and as they came back to Boston, they were just 1 game back, and they would finish September winning their last 7 games. And the infuriating part for the Red Sox is the Yankees won their last 6, beating up on the 2 worst teams in the division, and the Indians and the Blue Jays. And that left 1 final game for each on October 1st. And in order for there to be another game for each, the Red Sox had to win, and the Yankees had to lose. The Red Sox did their part, winning 5-0 over the Blue Jays, and later that day, Rick Waits would become a Boston hero and ultimately change baseball history by pitching a complete game, giving up 2, as the Yankees lost 9-2. The screen at Fenway Park showed afterwards, "Thank you, Rick Waits. Game tomorrow." There had only been one other tiebreaker game in American League history prior, that being in 1948, taking place in Fenway Park, with the Red Sox facing the team they were rooting for in '78 in the Indians, and Cleveland would end up winning that game 8-3, and the Red Sox were hoping to get a different result this day. In a nationally televised game in the afternoon, the pitching matchup was not in their favor, as Dennis Eckersley pitched just 2 days prior. On the mound for the Red Sox was the former Yankee and Mike Torres, who posted a 3.92 ERA with a 16-12 record that year. While he was pretty good, he struggled late in the season, losing his last 6 games. And the reason it didn't look promising is he was up against Ron Guidry, who would win the Cy Young that year after leading the league with a 1.74 ERA while compiling a league-best 25-3 record, throwing 16 complete games, with 9 of those being shutouts. One of the best pitched seasons that gave him a second-place finish in MVP voting, losing to Jim Rice, who nearly won the Triple Crown, and both would make an impact in this game. Guidry was pitching on 3 days rest, and it showed as he wasn't as sharp as he had been, as the first impact came in the second, when Carl Yastrzemski would hit a solo home run to lead off the inning. And though Guidry wasn't as sharp, he was still effective, escaping jams such as stranding George Scott at third in the third after his leadoff double. All the while, Torres was pitching better than he had in months, Aside from the double he gave up to Mickey Rivers in the second, he was easing through the Yankee lineup. And in the bottom of the sixth, the Red Sox doubled their lead. After a Rick Burleson double and a sac bunt, that year's MVP and Jim Rice would drive him in with a single. Guidry wouldn't allow another to bring things to the seventh, with the Red Sox having an 81% chance to win, and that would go up to 85% when Greg Nettles flew out to start the inning. But things slowly crept in the Yankees' favor when Chris Chambliss and Roy White hit back-to-back singles. And there, Bob Lemon decided to pinch hit the lefty Jim Spencer, who would fly out for the second out. And the loud Red Sox fans still had reason to be confident, as up to the plate came the 9-hitter, Bucky Dent. Dent was your typical middle infielder at the time, good contact numbers with little power. Through his first 5 full seasons, Dent hit a total of 22 home runs, and that season was his worst to that point, dealing with injuries as he was hitting just .243 with 4 home runs, so there was no reason not to go after him. And even if Dent put the ball in play, it was very unlikely that the Yankees would have the lead afterwards. And despite all of this, Yankees president Al Rosen turned to George Steinbrenner and said he's gonna hit one out, and he would be proven right. As with Mickey Rivers bat in hand, Dent would manage to hit the Torres pitch over the Green Monster for a 3-run home run that put the Yankees ahead and silenced the 32,925 people in the crowd. And after the Yankees poured back into the dugout, they still weren't done. Mike Torres would be pulled out of the game after walking Mickey Rivers, and into the game came Bob Stanley. Rivers would steal second, and Thurman Munson would hit a double to double their lead and bring their chances to win to 80%. The inning would finally end after a Lou Piniella flyout, and after a strikeout and a George Scott single, Ron Guidry's day would end with a chance to be the winning pitcher. And into the game came the other Yankee who finished top 5 in Cy Young voting, in Goose Gossage, who got the next 2 to escape any threat. And to start the 8th, Mr. October would hit a solo home run to increase the lead to 3, and that home run would be massive after what happened the next inning. Jerry Remy led off the 8th with a double, and after Jim Rice flew out, Carl Yastrzemski, Carlton Fisk, and Fred Lynn hit singles. And now the lead was at just 1, with runners on first and second with 1 out. But Gossage would regain himself, getting Butch Hoffman to fly out, and George Scott to strike out, sending things to the 9th with a score of 5-4. And that would be the score as he came back for the bottom of the 9th. And things looked good when Dwight Evans flew out to start the inning. But as he had just done in the 8th, he decided to give everyone a heart attack by walking Rick Burleson to giving up a single to Jerry Remy. And up to the plate came the MVP and Jim Rice, with the tying run at second and the winning run at first. And Jim Rice would hit a drive to right, but it was caught by Lou Piniella, allowing Rick Burleson to tag up and go to third. And now it was up to future first ballot Hall of Famer Carl Yastrzemski. And on the second pitch, he would pop out to Greg Nettles. And after once being down 14 games, the Yankees were now the winners of the American League East for the 3rd straight year. And as teams who make huge late-season comebacks often do, they carried their momentum into the postseason. A postseason that was almost a dead replica of 1977. They beat the Royals in the ALCS for the 3rd straight year in 4 games, and for the 2nd straight year, and 11th time, and the most recent time, they went up against the Dodgers in the World Series. And just like the previous year, they would win in 6 games. And the MVP of the series would be the MVP of the 1-game playoff in Bucky Dent, after hitting .417 in the series. And the entire postseason just made the entire year more devastating for Red Sox fans who are trying to get a sense of joy by hate-watching the Yankees. And as happened countless times throughout the century, that did not end well. For a quick overview of the Curse of the Bambino and its existence, you can just tell the story of the 1978 season. The 1978 World Series MVP received a nickname from Red Sox fans after the tiebreaker game, that being Bucky Dent, obviously having to shake your head while saying it. And it wasn't just because the home run came out of nowhere from someone who rarely hits home runs, it was all that led to it that made saying his name so painful. Blowing a 14-game lead is horrible enough, but doing it to the Yankees made it possibly the most painful moment in Red Sox history, within one that's had a lot of painful moments, almost all coming in that century. And to further understand why the home run was so painful, you can look at the decades that led to that point. 1978 marks 60 years since the Red Sox won the World Series. And in that period, the Yankees won 22 World Series, while the Red Sox won 0. And it seemed all the events of 1978 could only happen to one side, and also only happen to the other side, with a name and home run that would live in the Yankees-Red Sox lore and remain relevant to this day. The biggest home run in this rivalry would come 25 years later, when Aaron Boone hit the walk-off home run in Game 7 of the 2003 ALCS. And Bucky Dent was still fresh in everyone's mind, as afterwards, Red Sox fans referred to Aaron Boone as Aaron Boone. As just like Dent, the home run really came out of nowhere. Though Boone was more of a home run hitter than Dent, not saying much. And funny enough, both Dent and Boone would go on to manage the Yankees, with Boone's current tenure lasting much longer. And the reason Boone's name and home run, though a huge moment, wouldn't carry as much weight as Dent is 1. The Red Sox didn't blow a 14-game lead prior to that, 2. The Yankees wouldn't win the World Series after, and 3. The Red Sox would of course end their curse the following year, instead of prolonging the curse for a few more decades. But in that moment in '78, it seemed that the 2004 season would never happen, and the Yankees were just inevitable, as some guy with the actual name of Bucky Dent would save the Yankees and crush Boston fans for decades, especially with what was to come after. And for the full story of when this historic rivalry peaked, you can watch my video about the rivalry and the 2003 through 04 seasons.